Good morning, everybody. I feel like I could do a little bit better on the bell ringing, but I'll practice. So welcome, everybody. Another Saturday morning together. Just a few announcements before we start. We'll have a day-long meditation tomorrow at Blossom Studio, which, does anybody know the neighborhood for that? Lake City. So people, there's more information about that in the back, and if you're going to come, you could let Allison know. I think her phone number, email is back there, but a full day of just listening. The theme of the retreat is listening all day, meditation as receiving or a receptive way of practice. There's actually not an email listed, so I do think it's everyone just drop. Okay, there's no email on that, so you can just drop by if you like, and practice in the morning and all afternoon up until 4 p.m. So,
Ajahn Kovila will be there.
And I'll be there. Yep, listening together. Gary, do you have any announcements?
Thank you. We're donated this space every week by the cathedral across the way, and in gratitude for that, we have left a box over here on the table of information for anybody who would like to make a contribution to the cathedral in gratitude for the use of this space.
So today, we were hoping we were going to have a monastic teacher of ours, Ajahn Jyotipalo, come, but he was sick and couldn't make it. But what we are going to do instead, he's doing just fine, but I was just a bit too concerned to come down. What we'll be doing instead is something we do every 2 months or so, which is a Q&A session. We often don't have a time to answer all the questions that come up. Q&A followed by a community stories session, which is a chance for anyone who wants to share up here to talk about their path to Dhamma. And it's a pretty beautiful moment for the community to just hear from different members. And so if you didn't have anything to proliferate about during your meditation, now you do. But do consider it's a gift to the community coming up, and we don't even have to post it to YouTube. Also acknowledging my cousin Jimmy. Raise your hand, Jimmy. Let me embarrass you. That's my cousin, and Jimmy, thank you for coming and visiting us. If you want any of the good old stories, he's the guy. So talk to him. We also have Lava and his friend Diana here. Lava, raise your hand, and Diana. They drove up here from Oregon. Lava just finished flight school. He's been with us for years. Just really glad to have him visiting. And is Jamie here from Portland? I thought so, Jamie from Portland. So just acknowledging and rejoicing in how many people are coming from afar to be part of this, and really lovely.
So we can chant together. We'll do the chant on page 57, the 10 subjects for frequent recollection. We did a deep dive into this, I think, 2 weeks ago, and then that day we only had 6 laminated versions of it. And so the first 6 people who raised their hand, we gave them the laminated versions, but one of our great community members printed out 30 more. So anyone who likes this chant, or if you just like laminated things, you feel free to take some of these. We got about 20 in the back, and I've got 6 or so here. And we'll just do the English. So starting with this bhikkhus, and that it literally means monastics, but we can take it as practitioners. So anyone who's here trying to practice wholesome mental states are all included in this. And the going forth that's talking about is just, going forth from unwholesome qualities into going forth into wholesome qualities. And we'll just do the English, and we won't do the part that says this should be reflected upon again and again by one who has gone forth, which is said after each of the 10 reflections. Okay. Bhikkhus, there are 10 Dhammas which should be reflected upon again and again by one who has gone forth. What are these 10? I am no longer living according to worldly aims and values. My very life is sustained through the gifts of others. I should strive to abandon my former habits. Does regret over my conduct arise in my mind? Could my spiritual companions find fault with my conduct? All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma. What karma I shall do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. The days and nights are relentlessly passing. How well am I spending my time? Do I delight in solitude or not? Has my practice borne fruit with freedom or insight, so that at the end of my life I need not feel ashamed when questioned by my spiritual companions? Because these are the 10 Dhammas to be reflected upon again and again by one who has gone forth.
There's by the way, restrooms in the hallway, just so people know. So we'll meditate together for about 20 or so minutes. Begin by establishing an upright posture. You can imagine a string pulling up the crown of your head towards the sky, elongating your spine. Notice and soften any tension in the eyes, the forehead. The jaw. Smile slightly on the inside of your mouth and soften the belly. Allow yourself to center with the breath naturally settling. You can continue to do your usual meditation or follow along for this Buddhanusati meditation, recollection of the Buddha. A skillful means to brighten the mind. You can imagine waking up in the middle of the Ganges River Valley, India. The rest of the household hasn't yet woken. It's quiet, pre-dawn. And suddenly you remember today is the day that you heard the Buddha was going to be coming. For months now, you've heard stories of a teacher wandering. You've seen glimpses of monks and nuns in ochre robes passing by the field where you work. You've heard murmured the name of the Buddha. They say he was a prince of the Sakyan clan who went forth and gave up everything. And something in your heart leaped up when it heard. And so finally today, he's come to quietly ease out of bed so as not to wake the rest of your family. Tiptoe into the kitchen where you light a lamp, and in that flickering glow you carefully cut a mango into pieces, one you chose specially from the market yesterday for this. You don't know if the rest of your family will be interested. This is for you. And as the sky lightens to a lighter gray, you leave the house, walk onto the dusty road, the outskirts of Savatthi. There's the usual neighbors going about their chores, a cart walking down the road, but also there's others walking away from the city, quietly, some with offerings. And you turn with them and walk out past the gates, joining a steadily growing current of people of all castes. There's Brahmins, Katyas, noble warriors, Vangsas, noble, the merchant caste, and you hear murmuring around you, quiet but excited words, the Blessed One. You see lepers. You see refugees from the wars you've heard of ravaging the cities around you, from the famine. the hardship and tragedy of life, and yet a light in so many of their eyes as they gaze towards the forest you all are walking towards, a strange hush falling over everyone as your feet begin to touch grass instead of dust. And you find yourself joining a crowd who's formed in a meadow bordered by sal trees. There's the usual whispers of a crowd, but somehow a strange quiet, and as you gaze over the heads of those in front of you, you finally, for the first time, see him. Somehow the Buddha looks like you thought he would, stand or sitting. Tall, quiet, a noble warrior caste, and somehow all the noise around you disappears, and there's just the rush of some timeless pulsing at your ears as you see suddenly something beyond all the suffering you've come from and known. A peace and compassion in a face which you hadn't realized you'd longed for so much until now. On his left, there's a row of bhikkhunis and nuns, names you've heard whispered before. These women who you've learned the Blessed One, so different than others of your time, has declared completely, equally capable of enlightenment. And on his right, a line of monks sitting calm. Other giants of the Sangha you've heard of, Venerable Ananda, Venerable Sariputta, composed, back straight, eyes closed. You see a line of villagers, merchants, wealthy, poor, all types, kneeling as they shuffle up to the Buddha where he sits at the roots of this tree and offering with outstretched hands a dish of curry, rice, anything. And your heart begins to pound as you join the line and move closer and closer to each person in front of you. You watch as he gives some small word or just a quiet gaze. Until finally you find yourself in front of him. And shaking, offer up the small plate of mango that you've prepared. And summoning your courage, you look up into his face and see a face looking back at you with utter compassion, a face you feel has known you, knows you as deeply as yourself. A face of compassion and also of hope. And he holds your gaze. A sense of utter safety. And in that moment, make that moment yours. What does that face look like to you? The deepest part of you broken open and held. Maybe he says a word to you, and what would that word be? What would that phrase be? Of comfort, of hope, of understanding. This highest aspiration upon which you've set your heart in this life. What would it mean to see it? To stretch your hands out to it, to meet its gaze. And just allow that face, that gaze, those words, to stay with you. On his deathbed, one monk, Vakali, lamented that he had not seen the Buddha more, and the Buddha said, "What do you care about seeing this body, Vakali? One who sees the Dhamma sees me." And in this sense, the Buddha has never left us. So can you find that piece of yourself here now? Your highest potential, the greatest compassion. The North Star you found again and recognized, and home, true home. All in that gaze that you hold now. So we'll sit together with that for a time. Okay. So, we often don't leave time for enough questions and answers, so we're going to begin today with about 15, maybe 20 minutes for Q&A. People can raise their hand if they have anything they'd like to talk about, and we'll run a mic over to you. If you're on Zoom, raise your hand. Don't raise your hand. Are they around, just not on the TV? Good. Raise your hand and we'll have the AV hopefully call on you. After about 15 or 20 minutes, we'll switch to community stories. Who's been here for a community stories session before? They're really fun. They're really fun. And just to say that if you've kind of on the edge of sharing, just consider it a real gift to the community to do so and to kind of put yourself out there. The seed question we usually put out there for people to speak to is tell us about how you came to the Dhamma, or how has the Dhamma influenced you this last year? How has it affected your life? And we ask that people kind of be mindful of the number of people in the crowd who might be coming up, kind of keeping your answer to about 5 minutes. And in fact, we might select someone to be a bell ringer and ring the bell at 5 minutes. Doesn't mean you have to stop on the mark, but that's kind of a marker, like you reached 5 minutes, just be mindful of that. And people also tend to let the mic drift like this. So if we could have someone whose job is to be like raise the mic, that would be good too. Do we have a volunteer to do both those rules simultaneously? Moffat, great, okay. And we have 2 cushions for you in case one isn't enough, so you can really tower over things. If you do see someone who's come up, just consider after the gatherings stopped, going up and kind of thanking them for sharing. It takes a lot of bravery. We will be posting this onto YouTube. If you would rather it not be posted to YouTube, your section, just go up and tell the AV afterwards that you'd like your bit removed, and they can easily edit it out. That's it. Did I forget anything? All right. So we'll start with Q&A. What would people like to talk about? Miles, behind you, Miles. Behind you.
So if everything is empty, why are monks and nuns segregated?
Thank you. Is that Jules?
Yeah.
Good to see you. That's a decent drive, maybe 45 minutes or so, or longer from...
No, it's like 2 hours, but I didn't drive.
That's a long drive. Okay, fair. No, we thank you for this question, and I think we spoke to it briefly a few weeks ago, but it is one that there's a little more time. The chief reason, I think, was that when you're in 2 celibate communities, the potential for romantic infatuation becomes much more pronounced, and I'd say more so than in lay communities too. When you ordain, you pretty much cut off every route your mind has had for proliferation and going out into the world for sensuality, and you can get fixated on the weirdest things, like your neighbor's spoon. You can get quite jealous of. That's a common one. And so if you have 2 kind of different gendered communities sort of living together constantly, I think the potential for infatuation becomes much, much higher. And the attrition rate for monastics is already extremely high. It's very hard to kind of keep monks and nuns in robes. Mm-hmm.
That wasn't what I was talking about, but there is the prison phenomena as far as men. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
no,
meant more about roles and duties. As far as I understand, nuns are given different duties than monks.
I think there's some societies where the term like a mechi, for example, which is a white robe nun, in Thailand, traditional cultures, they do have different kind of duties in the monastery at times. But with bhikkhunis and bhikkhus, the duties are the same. The difference in rules, and there are, say the bhikkhunis have more rules than the monks, But much of that is due to the Buddha creating bulwarks against the cultural pressures that were prominent for women and not for men at the time. So for example, one of the rules for bhikkhunis is like keeping them from performing domestic tasks because they were drawn into that a lot. They also aren't allowed to fan us while we eat. So like whenever there was an issue that came up where the Buddha saw that the women were being pulled into these old roles because it was such a novel thing, he would put up a rule for them. But no, I mean, in the context with bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, which is, you know, the fourfold assembly that we want to exist in personally, there's no distinction between those things.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jules. Thanks for making the 2-hour drive.
I didn't drive.
Thanks for making the, well, bicycle. No, thank you. Others? Did you?
Next question.
Amitofo. Hi, Dharma Masters. I'm sure you've answered this question before in the community, but I think it's just such a good one to reiterate. How important do you feel upholding, particularly the 5 precepts, but additional precepts as well, in our relationships as lay practitioners for friends, family, partnerships, so forth?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm glad that you could make the travel down here as well. Yeah, 5 precepts, that's basically the basis for a Buddhist, traditional Buddhist morality. So the 5 precepts are at the back of this book, and the first Saturday of every month we have a formal offering or giving and taking of the 5 precepts. Those are, I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which has not been given, from sexual misconduct, from lying, and from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs, which lead to carelessness. And it really is a beautiful and basic and system for mutual harmony and safety, like a feeling of safety and community and relationships. And I mean, Ajahn Nisabo and I have been living in cultures where that's just granted. Like everyone who comes and stays in these monasteries, even just for a short period of time, are just by default keeping these 5 precepts. And you get this feeling of real safety. You can trust, you know, what the people around us say all the time. And you can say it's a cloistered way of living, but you relate to humanity differently when you live in a culture or a family or a group or in a couple where you can really trust that the other person won't hurt you and that they won't take advantage of you and that they won't use substances which might lead to some level of heedlessness, which might bring about breaking those other precepts. So it is really important, but so are just other relationships. Like the Buddha does say that there's a special relationship between children and their parents, and if we have old friends or people in our lives who we do have a relationship with, and that it's an important relationship, and they are not committed to keeping these precepts or to training in them. That's a big part of how they're undertaken. They're not commandments. They're not something which has been forced down upon you from on high. Individually, and from time to time, we do it every month, and really you can do it every day if you wanted. Definitely encourage people to memorize these, put it up on your wall, and recite it every day so you can remember that it's a part of your life and a part of your system of personal integrity and relationship integrity. But yeah, if other people in your life are not keeping those, you don't have to cut anybody else off who you can't cut off or don't, you know. And yeah, just relating to those people with love and compassion. If you yourself aren't ready to take all those 5, I mean, it's so extremely voluntary. And just take as many as you can. If you can keep all of them, keep them as long as you can. The more precepts you mentioned might be the 8 precepts. That's renunciate precepts. So maybe having a space in your life for giving up some level of entertainment, giving up some level of beautification, some level of we don't lie on high and luxurious beds, so some level of luxury, giving that up, and it's a training in how simple we can live and still be happy. So yeah, it is really important, and I think the longer you live, at least if you yourself aren't keeping these precepts, the longer you live with people who are, and you see that the harmlessness and the harmony that comes about from living with people and living with these precepts, you just see how beautiful it can be and how safe you feel around people who are doing that, and you're like, I'll just, yeah, it's a good thing to experiment with, and yeah, giving as much care and love to everybody around us as we can. And if you do see beauty and worthwhileness in keeping these and with the people around you, then leaning in that direction.
Just to mention the Buddha framing these as great gifts of fearlessness, giving people that gift of fearlessness, and also just the happiness and healing power of the precepts over time. If you have a lot of shame or remorse, if you keep these precepts, there is a sense of wholesome kind of healing quality that comes from them over years, a healthy sense of self-worth. So they're profound, especially that fourth one on not lying. That can transform a life very quickly. Trenton on Zoom.
Yeah, there's 3 people on Zoom, starting with Allison.
Allison, go for it. Can we turn up the volume on the mic a little?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, thank you. This is not a question, Ajahns and community, but just a mention. No, sorry, Ajahn Kovilo, there's I didn't communicate this, but no longer needed to RSVP or anything to me for tomorrow's day long. Plenty of space. Hope those that can make it can. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Great. Great. And next person?
Martha. She has
Here I am. Sorry. So I'm new and I will be coming next weekend, but I would love it if, as you mentioned in the meditation, we know that in the time of the Buddha, there were wars, there were conflicts, there were things that people in India had to deal with, including the Buddha. And so if you could reiterate some of the teachings of the Buddha in dealing with times of crisis, and I'm kind of thinking, given the current environment, the Buddhist version of the Serenity Prayer.
Yeah, so the Serenity Prayer, for people who don't know it, it's Lord, or may there be, we talked about this, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, but may there be the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And yeah, Martha, thanks so much. It'll be good to see you next week. And thanks for bringing this up. Yeah, the Serenity Prayer is extremely Buddhist, and it works so much. It's a great principle just for meditation. So just when you're practicing by yourself, and that's most of the context, which we talked about it 3 weeks ago. I think the name of the talk was A Buddhist Serenity Prayer. But also in relationship to the outside world, to have the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And on a personal level, that wisdom is just so much more trainable. You've just got more data about yourself and how much you actually can influence your own actions of body, speech, and mind. And with other people, it's just so much more complicated. We don't know how much we can push and how much of an impact we can make on society. And so it really is both on internal level with meditation in your daily life. It's a matter of experimentation, and on a level of outside as well. If you can keep those precepts, that really keeps things safe in large measure. If you're not going to lie, you're not going to speak harshly, but also experimenting and speaking speaking truth. And a big principle that we spoke about last Wednesday, if you are going to be, someone brought up, I think there was a bishop who just on the eve of the inauguration, Trump somehow went to a church, a cathedral. I'm not sure what Christian denomination, but this bishop gives this talk urging compassion and doesn't, Trump is right there, second aisle, but she doesn't call him out. She's basically urging compassion, the quality of compassion and consideration and mindfulness. And this is very much in line with the way that the Buddha urged people to, he said, you should know what it is to praise and what it is to, or how you should censure. And when you're praising something, you should not censure or praise speaking directly to a person, but to the qualities or the actions. So she did that very well. She's encouraging the mental action of compassion, consideration, mindfulness, and wisdom, but isn't calling someone out by name. Because when you do that, you all know, just in relationships, when you call someone out or, there's so much ego which can be immediately inflared that people can't hear and they can't listen, and then there's this automatic reactance from people. So if you can frame things based on an action, then people are much more likely to hear them.
Thank you.
No, the circumspection around speech, which Ajahn Kovil is pointing to, is key. And Martha, thank you for bringing this up. I think a few things are also helpful to keep in mind. And one is, yes, to really recollect the Buddha's time. There were wars crescendoing around him and happening and clashing. There were some of his chief disciples, King Bimbisara, getting murdered by his son. And you see how the Buddha walked through all that with such equipoise and care. And just recollecting, every time believes that their time is the end of times. It's kind of a classic human conceit. But to really widen our gaze and see this has been the state of samsara to one extent or another for a long time, and even far, far worse than whatever opinions you have about the current politics or moment. And taking a lot of heart in the recollection of monks and nuns through the Maoist revolution in India, where they were beaten trying to get them to disrobe and they would refuse to disrobe, or Tibetan monks imprisoned and kind of, when asked later if they were ever afraid, one saying, I was afraid I would lose my compassion. And just to recollect, this is nothing special. Keeping your heart in a good place is key. Using appropriate attention to engage with the news only so much as you can keep your heart centered and cared for. And trusting that if you manage to do that, that there's no distinction between the benefit to yourself and the benefit to others. If you can keep your heart in a good, dharmic, caring place, that is the energy and the dynamic which will actually affect true change. The Buddha was speaking truthfully when he said, anger is never stilled through anger. This is eternal law. Anger is never stilled through anger. This is eternal law. So if you can keep your heart in a good place, trust that attending to that quality in your own internal practice will ripple out powerfully. That's worth a lot. And remembering that this is not a unique situation in the sense, it is unique in some ways. There are, it's not that there aren't actions to be taken if you feel compelled, but just widening your gaze a little to hold the wider context of history can give a little more space to that conversation internally.
Thank you both.
Let me one more. I think we have time for another, maybe in person, actually. Actually, Scott. And while we're running the mic over to Scott, maybe actually one more on Zoom, Trenton, if you have it.
Jack on Zoom, if you'd like to ask your question while, please feel free to do so.
Thank you, Ajahn. Actually, I kind of felt like your answer to Martha's question, in a moment of synchronicity or something, it seemed to answer the question I had as well, which was slightly different, but I felt it was applicable. So thank you.
2 for 1. Thank you, Jack. Great. Scott. Is it on, Trenton?
Okay, there we go. Different traditions teach different things to do with your eyes when you're meditating, and open, closed, half open, you know, looking upside down. Any ideas of, any thoughts about what to do with your eyes that's better, worse, no different? Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We've been doing a lot of Zoom meditation. So we're in our 5th week of our winter retreat. And what we're doing every weekday, we've got 7 hours a day of Zoom meditation. So you can look on our website, and we've got an early morning session for 3 hours, a midday session for 2 hours, and an afternoon session for 2 hours. And yeah, open eyes versus closed eyes becomes strangely and somewhat embarrassingly apparent when, yeah, if you've got a camera facing you all the time. And I think it's just useful. I mean, the main point of, you know, in America, we just fetishize meditation. I came here for the meditation, not so interested in the philosophy, not interested in the ethics, just the meditation. The Pali word, the Buddhist word for meditation is bhavana, which is cultivation, and it's something which you cultivate, you practice 24/7, or at least during your waking hours. And yeah, what we want to be able to cultivate wholesome qualities, not just when we're sitting down, but throughout our whole lives. So being able to cultivate, to do bhavana throughout our daily lives, most of the time of which we have our eyes open, is good. And so meditating with eyes open can be useful. It's a good training ground because the conditions are so much simpler. And for myself, if you're meditating a lot, it's useful as well to be able to do both, and each have their usefulness. You know, if you've been having your eyes open all day and just tracking and reading and walking and interrelating and communicating, the eyes have just been so frenzied all day, and just to be able to close them for a while and to stay awake and to practice being awake with the eyes closed is a skill in itself. But as is being able to have your eyes open and stay internally still. And when the mind is agitated, practicing with eyes closed can be helpful. If the mind is tired, then practicing with the eyes open is really helpful. There's a Zen way of doing, 50-50. You're kind of looking down about maybe a foot, 1.5 meters in front of you, and just half open, half closed. And yeah, really relaxing the muscles around the eyes and allowing those to relax is just so pleasant. So, you have more to say?
I think that's great. Although if you all want to unnerve Ajahn Kovila this afternoon, everyone on the Zoom meditation could just stare at him. So we should wrap stuff up, and in terms of the Q&A. And if people, we have Wednesdays evenings for more questions and answers, but we want to leave time for the community stories because it's a pretty precious thing. So if you're feeling up for it, sharing with the community in about 5 minutes how you came to the Dhamma, what it's meant to you, or what it's meant to you this last year. And if you've already shared, if you would maybe hold off on sharing and give space to those who haven't yet come up. And yeah, just feel free to come on up if you're feeling a bit brave. And Moffat, and we'll need another mic, I believe, up here. Please. And so Moffat, your job is to ring the bell at 5 minutes. You don't have to stop if it's exactly at 5. And if someone's hand drifts down like this with the mic, just a little up. And yeah, definitely trying to keep the mic here.
Here.
Welcome.
Okay. Hi, thank you. My name is Danielle. So I came to the Dhamma about 7 years ago, when I was in Ecuador and managing, and someone came and I was training him, and I was hammering him on something he wasn't doing right. And he just continuously handled everything so gracefully, and I felt very curious, like, what is this human doing? How is he developing? And he told me, I can't come in the morning because I have to sit. And I thought, what is this sitting? Come, you be here, you're needed. And eventually I said, what are you doing? And he told me, well, I practice Vipassana and I sit in the morning, and I've just come from a 10-day, and this is what I do. And something, maybe you know it too, like a gong rang inside of me, and I know, like, oh, this is for me. And so then within about 6 months, I found myself in Malaysia sitting my first 10-day with this profoundly developed teacher there who had this metta that was just sitting in front of him, was like, yeah, this experience that I hadn't had before. And I left that first 10-day course knowing everything is here, like this vision of like the Zen garden sand, kind of this meditation just peeling layer upon layer of everything that wasn't me. But I knew, I was 24 at the time, and I thought, yes, but I don't have the patience for this, because this is organically going to peel the things, and I have things I want to go after now. So 6 months later, I sat in India again and again, peeled more layers, and it's just been this kind of dance with the Dhamma of sitting courses and peeling. And a year and a half ago, I committed everything and just my whole path and gave up all my other spiritual practices. And it's been the most profound experience thus far, and very cliche, but now I'm like selling all my possessions and like emptying everything and doing the whole thing, and finding myself just in a place that is, I'm so grateful to the Dhamma, yeah, and developing and committing my life to Shila and practicing 2 hours a day, and just these things that have fundamentally changed the way that I experience life. Not that life has changed, as my teacher says. It's not about when everything is going right, but when everything is going dead wrong. And just feeling the grace of, yeah, the flow of Dhamma. And yeah.
People can make Anjali. We'll save the big sadhu for the end, but just Anjali.
Yeah.
Thank you, Juanita, for this cushion, the extra one. So over these last years, this community is growing more dear to me all the time, and I've gotten to know so many of you. But in terms of this last year, this actually happened a couple of weeks ago. Ajahn Kovilo, in his Dhamma talk, mentioned an article from Atlantic Magazine about social distancing and the isolation that we're experiencing, and it's definitely on the rise, and different groups are higher than others. And so I brought up the article. It's kind of depressing, and to say the least. So that was Saturday, of course. So the very next day, there's a lot of you have been to Kubota Garden. It's in the south end of Seattle, beautiful park, Japanese garden. And I often go there a couple of times a week, take my dog for a walk. And so I was walking out of the park. We were finished with the walk and coming to the exit. And before me were 6 or 7 people, all from Clear Mountain, walking together. There it was. And that we're doing something different here in this community. It was so touching. Matt, you were there, and it just made my day week. And I think of what's happening here. It's different. Thank you all for being here. And Ajahns sadhu.
Gail is foremost in our community in cool slippers, just so people know.
And they match.
And they match.
And the article is I think it's called The Antisocial Century, and maybe the December edition of The Atlantic. So I think.
Hello, everyone. My name is Julie.
My heart is pounding out of my chest right now. But I had heard about Buddhism many times in my life and always thought, wow, that's really cool one day when my life isn't so crazy. But when COVID hit, I was living yet another extremely intense chapter in my life. And my husband and I were both involved in startups where our big dream was to save the world. And when all that fell apart, I found myself in the midst of a very deep depression for the second time in my life. But having come out of the first one 35 years prior, I knew I could. And so I worked hard for that. But it was about a year in the making. And during that time, I was listening to Insight Timer to help me go to sleep. And I had some favorite composers. And I came across, there was one I loved, and I came across, he had a recitation of the Dhammapada. And it just resonated so deeply with me. I listened to it probably 100 times and bought several versions of the book, different translations. I found myself searching for learning more about Buddhism. At the same time in my life, I ended up taking a job in a service industry for the first time ever, hence the clothing. Big shout out for my employer. But it's been really, I had to try many different forms of Buddhism and communities of Buddhism, and I just want to say that I knew deep in my heart that this was absolutely changing my life, and I was scouring through books and videos and different sanghas and different teachings, and well, I finally found home. And so I think Ajahn Nisabo wanted me to mention that I managed to change my work schedule so I could be here in person on Saturdays too, but I also do Sunday nights and Wednesday nights. And thank you all, and in the morning meditations lately as well. So just wanted to say thanks to all of you, just the warmth that I feel in this community. And the last note was simply that I wanted to say that it's so touching to me, the level of commitment and dedication that I feel from everyone here, and also just everything you offer us is just incredible. I mean, so much. So I'm not much of a weeper, but here I am. Thank you.
On Zoom, Aurelian.
Hello. Hello.
Hey, Aurelian, we can hear you. What time is it over in England?
It is 6:38.
All right.
Okay.
Please.
So, my journey to the Dhamma was quite, I don't know, interesting. I don't know. When I first went to university post-COVID, I was in a new city. Found myself flung into a world that I was not prepared for, very lonely and isolated from my family and my friends. And that resulted in me getting into some undesirable situations and a really difficult relationship. And after 2 years of that, I had reached a breaking point, and I got to a point where I just wanted to close my eyes and never open them again. And I had a lot of determination to not entertain that thought because I knew it wasn't productive slash healthy slash mentally conducive. So I started to research meditation techniques. And luckily, I live in an age where everything's at the, tip of my fingertips. I can just search things up. And I had I was already familiar with some psychiatrists on YouTube who were into Buddhism. And from that, I joined some Discords. And from that, there was an Ajahn Nisaba video linked. Um, and then from that, I started attending these calls. And the real benefit for me that the Dharma gives me is in these uncertain times where I don't know if what I'm really working for is the right thing because of, the advancements in technology, I can just relax, practice the Dharma, and not worry about any of that stuff. I can just give myself the certainty of the wisdom and contentment. And no matter who's in the White House or what's happening in the European Union or whatever, I can just relax. And it's been incredibly beneficial and powerful for me and stabilizing my life. So thank you guys.
Sadhu, Aurelian.
Yeah, just in terms of Dhamma psychologists, this Wednesday we'll be interviewing Rick Hansen. He's the author of The Buddha's Brain and Neurodharma, and one of the really early authors, and he's a deep thinker in the realms of where Dharma and psychology overlap. So, 6 o'clock on Wednesday. And we still have time for others. Community. Yeah, please.
Yes. We're embarrassing people just enough. Okay, good.
Okay. Amitofo. So honored to be here. In the Dharma Realm Buddhist Association lineage, our Dharma teacher, our Dharma master, Dharma master Xuanhua always told us that you have to go up to go give Dharma talks to get good at Dharma talks. So he would make all of his disciples, lay people and monastics, cycle through. And so you have to go talk in order to get better at it. So I figured I would come up here and just do a little sharing. I don't think we ever lose the Dharma. I don't think it's something that we even find in the ultimate sense. I think it's always with us throughout all time. It's just something that we've forgotten. And I think the question that's being asked is about the remembering in our lives, something that brought us to a remembering of who we are, why we're here, what we're really seeking. I think that's so amazing that we all have a collective karma that brought us here together, a remembering of the most beautiful thing in life and the only thing that really matters. I don't know about the exact moment when I remembered, remembered that there's a way, that I've lost my way, but that there is a way, a great way, and I believe we're all on it. But I think I had a suspicion for a long time when I was younger that something wasn't really working, something's not quite right in our society and in the way the world is running. And yeah, so seeking, like all of you, the seeker, seeking some sort of truth and freedom from suffering. And at some point I had this like overwhelming experience where it felt like the mind that we typically use is just an illusion. It felt as if my mind was disappearing completely. But then there was an affliction, if you can believe it. An affliction of fear, and a sense of I was afraid of dying, losing myself. But it was the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced in my life. But it's not a thing, and it's everywhere in all moments. Beautiful, pure light. A light throughout our bodies, throughout each other, in all spaces, all time. You can feel it. I just could feel it everywhere. I met a monk, and the monk helped me ground. My teacher, Dharma Master Hung Shou, one of the first 6 disciples of Master Hua in what's on Turtle Island. And he helped me ground through Buddhism to understand emptiness in the context of a Buddhist path and the transformation of the afflictions, 4 Brahmaviharas, 6 perfections, 8-fold path, 4 noble truths, and so forth. The path of both virtue, cultivating virtue, the 8-fold path, and cultivating your sitting meditation practice and understanding emptiness and having both. Oh, that's roughly what happened. Just got a glimpse of how reality is and had to contextualize that in Buddhism. So yeah, thank you.
Ajahn Kovilo and I first met Indriani on our way. We were walking Tudong from San Francisco to Bayagiri, and we met her at Dharma Realm Buddhist University after camping in a grove of poison oak together. Thank you, Indriani. Samek or Trenton? Maybe Samek? Sure. Yeah. And then Trenton, would you like to come up, or was it someone on Zoom that you were raising your hand for? I'd like it if you came up after this. Yeah. Samek, then Trenton.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Samek. I've been coming here for a few years. I like the saying, like, it is a recognition. Like, when I found the Dhamma, when I recognized something, I think I was like 18 at the time. I was pretty depressed during COVID, and I didn't want to live anymore. I stumbled upon this book called Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It by Camille Ravikant. And that question, it was like a question that struck me, which was like, what does it mean to love myself like my life depends on it? And it was a question without an answer. It was a question like with no answer, but it gave me a path. Just like sitting in, what does it mean to love myself? What does it mean to love myself now? And during the time, I journaled a lot about that idea. There's a very intellectual debate in trying to understand that, and just doing that, just asking myself that question over and over again, made my life a lot better. And then when I was 21, I had a trip to Nepal, and during those 2 weeks, I was completely sick. Couldn't do anything, and I was being taken care of by my family, by community there, by my 4-year-old nephew. It was like a community of like a loving presence, and I hadn't had that before. And I felt like in my body love, and I was like, wait, this is different. And this is completely different. And after that, I looked for a community here, found Clear Mountain when I was around 21. I've been meditating since I was 18 as well, sitting in the question, and it's like changed a lot. And I still don't have an answer that's satisfactory, and at the same time, like, the path it's given me has been beautiful. So it's been quite enjoyable to just be here now.
Trenton? Someone once called Samek a vampire for truth. If you recommend a book to him, he might read it within about 2 days. And it's
Hi, my name is Trenton. I've been up here before, but just wanted to come up here again and tell more about myself. Yeah, so before Clear Mountain, I don't really think I had very much that I was living for. You know, like I had like a upper middle class life, you know, parents who were very generous and devoted, and really did a lot to take care of me and my brother, you know, but, you know, with the mind and dukkha and things like that, you know, it's like I was like addicted to the internet, had an eating disorder since I was 15. I've been treated for anorexia 4 times. And yeah, I've wanted to kill myself. And Buddhism was something I found in high school and thought it'd be a nice way for me to not be mentally ill anymore. But I didn't have sila. I didn't, as I've said before, I don't think I really had faith I could do it. Sensuality and bad habits and really looking at and really kind of just using ways to try to alleviate suffering that aren't very nourishing to the heart. And, you know, when I found Clear Mountain, things were still pretty hard. I was making efforts, but I had really bad scrupulosity. If people don't know what that is, it's like a type of anxiety about like morality. But, you know, I kept showing up. I'd like be afraid of like, oh, like what if this person doesn't like me, like low self-esteem and freaking out. Like I've cried at Clear Mountain events like several times. You know, crying can feel pretty good. But yeah, I think that thanks to Clear Mountain and, you know, practicing generosity, virtue, and meditation, it's something that can work. Ajahn Jeff kind of asks, like, when are you going to give the Buddha the benefit of the doubt? At least I heard something like that in a Dhamma talk from him once, but, you know, it's like, if we have right view and we have right resolve, goodwill, renunciation, and harmlessness, if we really believe the Buddha, this path will work. And I have a lot of work to do still, but I just want to say that I recently wrote on a piece of paper to put on my personal altar something like, I have been uplifted and sustained thanks to the generosity of other people. Because it's really important to have people who have more virtue than you, more conviction than you, people who are kind to you, who you associate with is really important. And when you have people who can lift you up and people who act in line with kindness and compassion, it can really change somebody. So yeah, I know I can be like, it's like, that's kind of just a little bit more about me. And yeah, I just want to say thank you to these Ajahns. I'm really indebted to both of you for all of the good Dhamma stuff that's been in my life. You've helped me and you've also helped others. So thank you.
I don't think we'll have a more powerful note to end on than that. So maybe we can all just do 3 big Clear Mountain sadhus for all those who shared. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. It always sounds weird when it comes over Zoom. And we can't explicitly recommend hugs, although maybe we can, but I think you're welcome to hug some people after this if you feel so inclined. Yeah, Ajahn approved. We really, yeah, we're never sure what will come out of these community story sessions, but I always find I come away really moved. And I think they're an important part of this community's growth is having people get a chance to raise their voices and speak about what's happening. And it always feels sacred to me, honestly. So thank you those who felt they could share and did so. Ajahn, dedication of merit and then new people. So maybe we could read from the chanting request list. And this is just a list of people we'll hold in our hearts and dedicate the goodness of the day to. While we're waiting for that, people could just bring any names they have in their hearts to the space, people they know who are struggling, who they'd like to hold. Joseph and Catherine. Juno and Elle. Jim and Linnell, sorry. And Juno and Lel. Brianna and Erica. Jessica's brother, Mike. Gary. Bob as well. Shirley. Jen Fon. Rick. Mark and Kirsten. Roy's mom, it's her birthday. Lava, it's his birthday too. Kyla. Josh. Leah. The cats at the shelter, Stu and Chili, with extreme autoimmune issues. Chanting request.
For Stanley Stamp, just passed away, spread loving kindness for a good rebirth. That's from Debbie Stamp and the Ajahns. For Chico from Lacey and the Ajahns, loving dog, moving forward, end of life with caring owner. Steve's brother just passed away, share merit. That's from Kirk's coworker. Garrick Druss just passed, share merit and wishes for peace for his grieving family and community, from Kim and Gavin. Kathy Howe passed away last year, from Ajahn Jyotipalo and Art Howe. And Peter passed away February 13th. Spread care for safe passage and grace to friends and family. That's from Christy and the Ajahns.
So we'll hold those names in our hearts for about 15 seconds, just dedicating merit. Turn to page
33 in the chanting book. The verses of sharing an aspiration. Just continuing that wish, any goodness that we've done this morning, sharing that, however that might happen, with everyone who we've named and everyone who we didn't name. Now let us chant the verses of sharing an aspiration. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, and through this act of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana. In every kind of birth, may I have an upright mind, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble guide. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and delusion be dispelled.
And for those unfamiliar with the dedication of merit, it doesn't have to be some kind of esoteric act. This is also just the way we change our relationship to these memories of people into something bright. So we like to open up the space briefly before we end, just to invite anyone who's been here 3 times or less, who's feeling bold, to raise your hand and just introduce yourself with your name and how you heard about us, if you're feeling up to it. We like Alf. Thank you. Welcome. Jamie.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I it's my first time here in real space, but I went to the Cloud Mountain retreat.
Thanks for making the drive, Jamie. Welcome. Welcome, Katie. All right, internet. Welcome, Hannah.
Charlotte, first time here. Also found out about it through the Cloud Mountain retreat in January, and it's lovely to see you two again.
Welcome. Welcome again, Charlotte. Jimbo. I encourage people to go embarrass Jimmy after this if you can. He's there, that one. Thank you. Internet. Okay. Great. So just rejoicing in what's coming together here in the Northwest. It's been such a gift to see this community grow, and I think people can really feel the power underlying it. And just to rejoice in that, make much of it. And part of how we do that is after the gathering closes, just get to know one another. We encourage people, if you're feeling up to it, to have one of the first people you talk to be someone maybe you haven't spoken to before. If you haven't gotten a name tag, consider going and getting one so people don't have to kind of awkwardly refer to you as you for too long. There's food in the back. Everything, you know, us monastics, we don't touch money. Everything is offered freely, including books in the back, so please take them. And laminated things, which Ajahn Kovilo loves so much. He's given me so many laminated things in my life with him. Too many laminated things. So please, just rejoicing in that. And once again, the day-long retreat is tomorrow. Information's in the back first. And I think that's it. Okay. Those who want to may bow to the Buddha. And wave goodbye to our friends on Zoom. And people on Zoom, feel free to stick around for coffee hour afterwards. We won't live stream that. And everyone wave to our AV crew who spent all the gathering trying to make the Zoom people here. Thank you.